So what is the mission of DRM? It's to prevent accidents and improve personal interaction. It's a good thing that everybody's on tonight. So. All right. So what are the benefits that we've seen from this resource management? So the pilot in command and dispatcher have joint operational control. The dispatcher's duties include communication and coordination with many people. So the two distinct benefits we see is better management of the information and recourses for safe flight operations, and a better interface with pilot in command and consistent with the joint responsibility concepts outlined in Part 121 of the FARs. So basically all around better control of the flight, better operational control, right? What is operational control?
The initiation, conducting, and terminating flight.
Exactly. So the reason why that's so important is that's every aspect of the flight, right? If we do that safely, we've provided good operational control. So some of the concepts, communication, right? That's really the central point, the where it all boils down to. So keeping good open lines of communication. Okay, having situational awareness. A lot of times when we're sitting at those desks, it's really hard when we have different things happen to maintain that high level of situational awareness. Ash and Michelle, Rex, you guys have seen it, right? There's a whole lot going on when you're sitting at that desk, and
yeah, for sure.
There's a lot that you got to take into consideration, not only to plan the flight, but also when you're, monitoring each of the flights. There's just a whole lot going on. We have 4 monitors on our desks, and I swear that's not enough still. We could use another 2 to 4. And, it's just extremely hard to keep on top of everything. Excuse me, sorry.
Daddy, my ankle feels better. Can't
Sorry
open the door. Oh!
Okay. Okay, have fun. All right, so, there's things that we can do to help increase our situational awareness. Things like reducing some of the communications, unnecessary communications that we have with other dispatchers. Maybe it's not important to know the score of the Dodgers game at the moment, or whatever. But
well, it's never important to know the score of the Dodgers game, just so we're clear.
Well, I had to choose something that wasn't very controversial. I mean, that's a pretty one-sided argument, right? It's not really a score that we're concerned about. But no, but just making sure that we're maintaining a good awareness of what's happening on our desk is pretty key to all these other things. So decision-making skills. There's something that I always do when I'm working, and that is if I ever question something, should I add hold fuel? As soon as I catch myself saying, should I add hold fuel, I automatically go, okay, I'm adding hold fuel. And then I'll figure out why I had that instinct to do that. It's important that we're paying attention to that intuition, that gut feeling, because a lot of times that's usually the correct thing to do. There's a reason why we have that feeling at the moment. So, making sure that we we're making good decisions is pretty key. Management of workload and prioritization. One thing that you guys will see in the interview is they hand you a list of 5 things. They want to see where your priorities lie. They want to see how you're thinking priorities lie. And they'll have one where it's like an airplane is holding over an airport and is running low on fuel. What do you do? I'm sorry. Is contacting him a priority? And there's a captain that calls you to ask you about the weather over another airport. And there's like all these 5 things hit your desk at the same point. And they want to see how you prioritize these different things, right? I'll tell you right now, always take care of the things that are in the air first before you take care of the things on the ground. It's super important, right? Because when you're in the air, you got to come down at some point. So making sure that you're giving priority to the things in the air is key. Whereas, things on the ground can wait. Yeah, we may delay a flight for 15 minutes, and it may even be our fault. But what's important to remember is that we're maintaining and we're prioritizing our workloads efficiently and making good decisions, right? It's pretty important that we take care of things that can't wait first. So, yeah. So attitudes and behaviors, right? It's amazing to see somebody that comes into work with a bad attitude and how quickly it affects all the people around them. I know a lot at my last job, there'd be somebody that would just start just destroying, oh, I hate this policy, it's so stupid, and they just go on for 30, 40 minutes. And the rest of your day is kind of ruined. You'd start chiming in and be like, yeah, I don't agree with that, or I don't agree with this, and start getting upset yourself. And the rest of the day, all of a sudden you're affected by that. Some of your decision making goes down the tube because you start making decisions in anger rather than in, good intention. So, maintaining a positive attitude and good behavior is also important. So the human factor concept. So there's several human factors. They've narrowed it down to a handful, but there's things like what we call macho. That's a person that feels like oh, I don't need any help. I can do it by myself. Refuse help, and they don't know how to ask for help. They may get in over their heads, but they still refuse to ask for help because they feel like they can control it. So another one is what we call get there-itis. And that's people that like are so in a hurry to get something done or get to a destination that they make mistakes along the way. They stop focusing on the important things, and they start focusing only on one objective or one goal. And so you can see how that could be extremely hazardous. Another thing that we see is what is it called? Doomsday or hopelessness. Um, and those are people that just, give in and just basically give up. um, let's um, sorry. So we call that resignation, basically. Resignation, what's the use? Just kind of give in and give up. Don't feel like trying because they feel like, you know, there's no positive outcome. Anti-authority, basically people that refuse to follow directions or rules. Basically, kind of like a no one can tell me what to do attitude. Impulsivity. Uh, those are people that shoot from the hip, make decisions without thinking them through, and then um, invulnerable, invulnerability. So people that it can never happen to me. I see these accidents on TV. I've done case studies. I've heard about all these different things, and it'll never happen to me. The reason why that's hazardous is because what if something does happen? Uh, Not being prepared to react because you felt like it was never something that could happen to you, it's pretty bad. We got to always make sure that we're staying on top of our game. So, yeah. So teamwork, right? What's kind of fun to see around the LCC, and I don't know, other people may have seen this themselves, but you can always tell when it's when something's going on, in the OCC. Aside from laughing and humor and people telling jokes and stuff, but there's times where you hear basically a huge, it's like all of a sudden everybody's getting phone calls, everybody's talking, talking to each other. People are up running around the OCC, asking questions, trying to coordinate with different people. It's pretty amazing to see how quickly you can see when things get bad, how quickly people are there to support each other. The chatter starts rising quickly, and everybody's, hey, I've got an MEL that just came across. We got an APU that went out on aircraft this. We need to do a swap. Hear the other guy yelling back at him, and then that guy's calling up the dispatcher. The dispatcher's, passing it on to the pilot. Stuff like that. It's pretty cool to see it all come into play. So, you'll work with a really good team when you work with dispatchers, because everybody's, pretty like-minded and wanting to help. Well, at least for the most part. So, effective management and information flow. So, when you see a problem or when you see something come up, making sure that gets disseminated to all the people that are affected by that. Just this last shift, something that doesn't happen very often happened to me. I had a flight going into Ottawa, Canada, and Ottawa had shut down all of its ILS approaches, and it only had 3 ILS approaches and like 4 RNAV approaches, so GPS base approaches. Well, the rule at SkyWest is if you have a single FMS aircraft. So we talked about the FMS is the flight management system. It's the one that's telling the pilots where they're at, and basically where they build the flight plan and so on. So when it's a single FMS aircraft, there's no redundancy for the GPS system. It's one unit. And so if there's no ground-based approach and all we have is RNAV approaches, then basically we need excellent visibility because we have to have what we call an MDA, or minimum decision altitude, and it's typically extremely high. So Ottawa was 1,800 feet above the surface, so it had to have 1,800 foot ceilings or greater. I only had 800, and this was at like 9 Zulu in the morning, and it wouldn't be legal. Ottawa wouldn't have been legal until like 17 Zulu. So huge delays, right? Anyways, it was kind of hard to understand. Canada publishes their NOTAMs a little differently than the US. They look different. And so it was kind of hard to understand if it was out of service or not. And so with all the work that I did, finding out that they didn't have any ground-based approaches, basically to save other dispatchers from having to find the same information out, I made sure that got sent out to all the dispatchers saying that, hey, Ottawa, Canada doesn't have any ground-based approaches. Minimum decision altitude is 1,800 feet, so on and so forth. But we were able to correct the problem and prevent it from happening to other dispatchers. So, making sure that we're flowing that information is important. Um, so cope with emergencies and stress. Um, you know, SkyWest does a really good job of taking care of families that work for them. You know, they have several programs where they'll, for people that are in need, um, they can help them out. They've got programs where you can turn in like vacation time to help out a family that may have experienced a recent death in the family, things of that nature. So they do a really good job of taking care of their employees in that sense. Um, and then as far as dealing with stress, like I said before, dispatchers, we've all felt the heat, felt the pressure. We've all had bad days. We've all had, really great days. And just because one desk is having a bad day doesn't mean the desk right next to them isn't, is also having a bad day. Sometimes the way flights are scheduled on desks, sometimes, you know, um, you may have different weather situations going on to where somebody may be way ahead and the other person may be way behind. And we're really good at helping each other out in those situations. So, um, and then participating in like role playing exercises and stuff like that. So, all concepts of DRM. So let's talk a little bit about communication. So most importance of DRM training, understanding the internal and external influences. And then the importance of a good communications is that we communicate effectively. Clear, concise, and proper phraseology. This is talking about like the phonetic alphabet and making sure that we're communicating, only having to communicate once rather than repeat ourselves over the radio, and jamming up the frequency because we're not communicating clearly. So, and then unambiguous. So, I don't know. Does anybody have anything to throw in there? Experiences that you guys may have with proper communication? Carrie probably has some good stories about lobbing shells 20 miles, making sure that they're falling in the right box.
Yeah, I mean, just I guess the most important thing, like being in a combat zone, and everything, is just painting the picture of what what's going on, and that's where the clear and concise and proper phraseology comes into play. Just painting the picture for the person on the other end.
Yeah. So, speaking of painting the picture, there's an accident that we'll read the investigation on a little bit. It's called the bowling alley accident. But it was basically an aircraft that was going in for a landing. And, it was still a little ways out from the airport. There were thunderstorms that were going to be impacting the airport fairly soon. And the dispatcher was trying to, quote unquote, paint the picture of what was going on over the airport. So he told the pilot, there's storms to the north, storms to the south, and basically it looks like a bowling alley right now. Pretty narrow strip of clear weather before the airport is impacted again. So the pilot, he told the pilot, expedite your approach because you don't have a lot of time in that window if you're going to land there. If not, divert to the nearest airport. So, anyways, we'll talk about it later, but yeah, making sure that we're painting that picture, and portraying effectively or what's going on is pretty important. So.
Well, and along those same lines, I think that's only effective for someone who's bowled before. That being said, in previous roles, we've had, I've had new hires try to explain to someone over the phone how to tie their shoes without knowing how to tie their shoes, just how to relay that information. To someone who's never tied their shoes before. How do you explain shoelaces and where your hands go and how to communicate that information? I mean, I can't speak for everybody in the group, but I know that I have had experience playing, games like telephone or telestrations where you're trying to draw a picture of a word and that person is trying to guess the word and then write the word or try to tell the person the word that they think that you're saying. And so communication is key.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, some of the ways that us as dispatchers can apply good communication would be in our briefings, right? So we don't always call the pilot before a flight, but basically in our release, it should eliminate any need for communication with the pilot. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't still call the pilot, right? It just means that we're clear and exactly what the pilot should expect in the release. There's still times that require a phone call. Sometimes the phone call is faster than trying to type out 3 paragraphs of notes for the pilot. So, one thing that, I've been critiqued on is there are times where I'd get behind on my flights on my desk. And so rather than trying to figure out the best route for a pilot, there's times where it's like, okay, I literally have to plan a route. And then there's times where it's kind of that gray area of, okay, I need to either figure out a better route for this guy, or I need to just load him up with fuel, depending on how much time I have, right? Just load him up with fuel, put a note in, and send him on his way. And it's kind of a blurred line sometimes. But I got critiqued one time. I had, sent a couple pilots where I just, everybody was still getting over the storm system. But instead of trying to route him a little differently and maybe, get around turbulence or things like that, I just threw on, extra fuel and said, hey, there's turbulence reported in this area right now. The storms are moving this way. Good luck, basically. Pat him on the back and send him out. Not really proper dispatching. I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but at the same time, it's not being helpful like we should be. And once I got the critique on that, I changed my attitude of, you know what, I'm going to make sure that I'm finding the best route around this weather. And I'm just going, rather than add extra fuel, I'm going to have that planned into my fuel, his reroute. So rather than him having a surprise from air traffic control and saying, hey, we're going to route you to the south of this weather, I'd already routed him. You know, I started routing him to the south of where I expected the weather to be, so that there wasn't any surprises. Worst case scenario, air traffic control says there's no factor, you can go direct from this point to this point, and then they just saved a bunch of gas, right? But at least I did my due diligence in making sure that they they had the fuel on board and they had a route that would more than likely keep them clear of potential weather situations. So yeah. So assertiveness. You know, why do you think assertiveness may be important? So assertiveness. You know, there's a couple different attitudes that we can have. We can have people that are overbearing, you know, jerks, or we have people that are just complete pushovers, right? So there's a fine line between each one of them. So you know, when a pilot calls, let's say, and says, I want 3,000 pounds of fuel when I land, you know, and you ask why, and he's like, well, I just like to land with 3,000 pounds. So you could be the jerk, and you could say, well, that's against our policy, and screw you, you don't get fuel. You can be the pushover and be like, oh, okay, here's your fuel. Or you can be somebody that's assertive and you can be like, well, you know, I don't really understand the justification as to why you need the extra fuel. If it's a comfort factor, I understand that. You can go ahead and request fuel on from the fueler when he gets there. But if there's something that you're seeing that I'm not seeing, you know, let's talk about it a little bit and really evaluate how much you really need. You know, things like that are going to be a lot more helpful in the long run. You know, you don't want to get walked over because that will increase your stress. That also, you know, increases your workload a lot of times. Whereas people that are jerks, that's not good customer service, and that's not really doing your job as a dispatcher of being safe, right? But when we're assertive in our in our speech and make sure that we're coming to a clear, concise decision, that's a lot different. So, um, you know, we need to be assertive, not jerks, not pushovers, but assertive. So,
Garrett, can I assertively ask that we take 10?
yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. So everybody jump back on at 8:45 or 8:50. 8:50. Let's say 8:50. Alrighty. So, some of the other ways we can practice good communications are, asking questions when we don't have answers. So, uh, using people around you, or using your supervisor, to help answer questions that you may have. Conflict resolution, prevent or resolve them. Never good, right? Listening, actively listening. So not only listening, but participating in and providing good feedback. Good interdepartmental coordination and interaction with others. Interpersonal relationships, key concepts are diversity, sensitive, be supportive, friendly, and keep on task. So workload management. So, use all the available resources. Stress management, go to bed on time. If you've got a shift at, 2 in the morning, you probably shouldn't be going to bed at 11 p.m. You probably shouldn't be up all night drinking or whatever. It's all those things are factors in stress. So, maintain good situational awareness. So, anything that increases stress is going to really play a part in increasing your workload and stress levels. So stress. So the definition of stress is the body's response to demands placed on it. Where does it come from? So physical. Not only the environment that you're in, loud music and stuff like that, but as well as your physical condition. They've actually done several studies where being healthy and in shape plays a big part into people's ability to handle stress. Psychological, am I safe? Make a little checklist for yourself. Am I being safe when I'm conducting or doing these releases? So, and then emotional, so one way to counter emotional stress is by problem solving, helping others and actively listening, stuff like that, as well as being there for people that may have a lot of stress on their plate. So, other causes of stress: life events, right? Death in the family, husband and wife lost a job, things like that. People in stress sometimes can let people stress you out to the point where you start losing situational awareness and stuff like that. So, and we already talked about, people with bad attitudes or behaviors can really hamper your stress levels. So, and remember that we all handle stress differently. Certain things may be stressors to some people, where to others it's not a big deal. So be mindful of that and be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So importance of stress plays a big part in our decision making. Poor judgment chains. It can play a big part in our performance. So low stress, 50 to 55 releases may not be a big deal. Whereas if we're in high stress and we have 55 releases, it might as well be 100 releases at that point. So This just kind of shows you a profile of a pilot's stress levels and where they may have issues. So in flight, we talk about sterile cockpits a lot. Anybody know what the sterile cockpit is? So a sterile cockpit is
Nobody is allowed to breach the cockpit doors within the first and last part of like pre-flight, taxi, takeoff, and approach and landing.
so it's a little more than just no external as far as physical people coming in and out of the cockpit, but as well as the sterile cockpit relates solely to only necessary communication and high stress phases of flight. So those phases of flight where we see the two biggest amounts of stress are going to be in the taxi takeoff and approach and landing. So sterile cockpit refers to no unnecessary communication under 10,000 feet on takeoff and under 18,000 feet on approach and landing. So when you're jump seating, basically if you're a jump seater, if you don't have something to inform the pilot of like, let's say he doesn't see it, but you see an airplane all of a sudden pull up right in front of you, or you see a truck out on the runway that he's not seeing. If it's not necessary to say, you can't be, joking about, different things. Basically, the pilot and co-pilot, the only communications that can be happening in the cockpit are the necessary call outs that they have to do. So
Cool, I did not know that.
yeah, so you'll also hear that when the pilots go above 10,000 feet. You'll see them turn off the no smoking light and turn it back on. You'll hear the doom, doom, the double chime. That's when they've gone over 10,000 feet. So that means that, we're above 10,000 feet. We can communicate normally, stuff like that. It's, kind of signifying to the flight attendants. Jeff, you probably have a little more insight on that, but then as well as when they descend below 18,000 feet, they'll do it again. But that's just signifying that they're in a sterile cockpit mode. But you can see, the pilot's capabilities typically stay pretty high until for some reason, until they land, and then they relax quite a bit. And this shows where the higher points of stress or task, the requirements that they have on them are. So, takeoff, there's a lot going on, and approach and landing, there's a lot going on. So, I want to make.
Does the pilot remind someone flying in the jump seat?
Yeah, part of their briefing every flight, they have to brief the dispatcher or whoever's jump seating on the procedures of the cockpit, where the exits are, where the ropes are, where the flashlight is, where the fire extinguishers may be, what to do in the event of an emergency. Just like the passengers get in the back, the pilot does the same thing for the guy in the jump seat. tells them how to pull the jump seat out of the stowage compartment, things like that. And then he always reminds you as well, sterile cockpits practiced from below 10,000 feet on takeoff and 18,000 feet on approach. So yeah. So here we kind of we see the cycle of our and the direct correlation of negative stress, positive stress, and our performance. So when we're at our optimum, we're effective. But if we have negative stress, we're less effective, less creative, so on and so forth. So it's just kind of a graph that shows us some of that. So how do we reduce the effects of stress? Staying ahead of the game. Making sure that we're not falling behind, working ahead as much as possible, things like that. That will help us prepare both mind and body for stressful situations. When we're falling behind on our desk and we get a phone call from a needy captain, what do you think that does to our stress level? Stress sends it through the roof. There's been a couple times where in our first banks we have a lot of flights. Typically, you get a little bad weather, you may fall behind a flight or two on your releases. And then you have a captain call you when you've fallen behind on getting your releases out. And he's like, well, I wanted to talk about, let's add 500 pounds of fuel and, can you put that on the release? And I don't really have a reason for it. Like, you feel like yelling into the phone, I don't have time for this shit, and slamming it down on the desk as hard as you can. But, you definitely cannot do that. That's the wrong thing to do. So, we need to stay ahead of the game as much as possible.
Yeah, that's definitely not effective communication.
Yeah, it's a breakdown for sure. There's been times where I'm sure you've had to deal with stuff like that, though, at work.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we all do.
Where you just want to snap. But
absolutely.
But anyways. So after burn time, put experience to rest. So just want to make sure that we're staying up to date on policies or procedures and stuff like that. And rather than just relying solely on experience, let's make sure that we're backing up our knowledge with current policies and procedures and staying ahead of the game. So coping with stress, acute or short term, relax, count down from 10, rub your earlobes and say goose frava, whatever you got to do. It's never a bad thing to call the supervisor either and say, I'm behind on my flights. Can you have somebody take a flight or two off my desk? Sometimes that's necessary. I've done it. Everybody's done it. Sometimes you can't help but get behind a little bit. So reducing that workload will definitely assist with that. So. Um, So chronic or long-term stress, physiological action. So go do push-ups or something. Eat healthier. Change your environment. If you come home to a madhouse where your kids are yelling and screaming and stuff like that, I don't know how to fix that. I'll be honest. Let's all be honest. Maybe tell the spouse to take them out for ice cream or something. I don't know. Emotional. Sometimes it gets to the point where we just need a therapist or something. Sometimes that happens, but whatever we got to do to help cope with stress. I mean, kind of the wrong thing to do that I've found out from experience and uh, observing others as well as myself. Kind of the bad thing to do is to feed into bad habits. You know, I was a sailor. Let's be honest, right? um, Definitely not the most healthiest life choices I could have made at any point in time. Drinking Monday through Friday and then partying on Saturday and Sundays is probably not the healthiest lifestyle. So, just making sure that we're staying healthy and, not giving
And
in to some of that bad stuff.
just to kind of underscore what Garrett's going over right here, if SkyWest is the employer that you do decide to go with, there are programs that are in place already for you to cope with stress, and the company does not want to set you up for failure. They don't want you to have to suffer through short-term or long-term stress. There are programs that are already in place that are designed to help you to work through things like this so that they're not working you.
Oh. And Ash is definitely the one to talk about it, right? You're in the people department, right?
That's me in HR. Hey.
No, but SkyWest is very good at helping people. I mean, you don't know how many times I've pulled up the SkyWest online and read stories of, SkyWest donating, you know, X number of hours to somebody that had, their wife in cancer treatment or whatever, and they needed help or, scholarships or whatever. They're very willing to help out and very active in maintaining the health and relationships of their employees. So, great company as far as that goes. Spiritual, whether it's Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Siddhartha, whatever, you know, sometimes,
Standing under a full moon and,
yeah,
throwing up dandelions, whatever works, right?
exactly. Some of the most spiritual places I've been are, in the mountains. St. George is a good place to kind of break away from the hustle and bustle of life and get out and go on a hike, or even when it's 113 degrees, there's places you can go and feel that connection back with whatever you want to call it. So uh, it's a big part of coping with stress. So and then lifestyle actions, that was something I was talking about. In the Navy, I had a lot of friends that came out on the other side, full blown drunken sailors for the rest of their lives, smoking 4 packs a day. That's And a lot of that has to do with stress, going through high stress situations and stuff like that. But choosing healthy lifestyles rather than succumbing to the easy outs is going to be a big part in reducing that chronic stress. So here's your definition of situational awareness. NASA says it's the awareness of acknowledging and assessing, and is the basis for choosing courses of action in the situation both now and in the future. Cool. So here are your components of situational awareness. We've got the dispatcher and pilot that are in charge of the safety of the flight and the operational control. And, we need to be making sure that we're monitoring what's going on with the aircraft, the environment, and the mission of getting from point A to point B safely. Aircraft, sometimes there's things that break on these airplanes, making sure that we're making good choices and we're aware of what's going on. All play a big part. So, loss of situational awareness, distraction, fixation, fatigue, stress, illness, attitude, alcohol and drugs, disorientation, complacency, medication. So, one of the big distractions would be, pilots calling in, or there's people that watch movies while they're dispatching. I personally don't know how you could do it because I'm busy enough. I don't have time to sit there and watch a movie. What's even worse is when you watch people that are watching movies with subtitles, then you really know that they're not watching what's going on. But fixation, sometimes we get so focused on a problem that we forget about the other things that are going on, right? So making sure that we're constantly doing checks and scanning everything on our desk and not just focusing on one point too much. Fatigue plays a huge part for your morning shift people, especially. Getting up at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning sucks. But fatigue's the silent killer, come up on you, you pass out at your desk. It's a bad day. Yeah, it's all pretty self-explanatory, right? All stuff that we've gone over. So, how do I know I've lost my situational awareness? Not staying ahead. I'm repeating steps, not only communications, but different steps that I've already taken. So, there's times in training that we have what we call the MTO box. And the MTO box, all you're doing is it's just selecting a runway, a temperature, a dew point, and a temperature and a barometric pressure, and determining, do I need anti-ice, or am I taking off of a wet runway or contaminated runway, pretty simple stuff that you can get through really quick if needed. And there were times where I would get fixated on a screen or on that MTEL box and just sit there and go over the same things over and over. Do I need anti-ice? Oh, I already checked that. And then I'd go to temperature, and then I'd go back. Oh, do I need anti-ice? Repeating steps. Bad juju. confusion or uncertainty of air traffic control system, um, shortcuts from standard operating procedures, unsure of weather conditions, or conditions of the aircraft and unsure of the condition of the aircraft. Oh, I like that. Double redundancy there. Double redundancy. That's how I say it when I'm talking about redundancy. Because you don't want to be
Double redundancy.
So preventing the loss of situational awareness, being prepared, planning and time management. Like I said before, staying ahead of the game, being vigilant, prioritizing tasks, increase awareness, communication, flight physiology, and decide. Decide is something that we'll talk about a little bit. It's an acronym, but initial training. So some of the components that we have here. We have initial training, then every year we go through a recurrency training. Done with a classroom lecture, we have exercises, we do very little role playing in LOFT, but continuing reinforcement, we get emails every day, it seems like, or something's changed, or we can't plan this, or we can't do this, or we can do this now, or we can go to these airports. Making sure that we're staying ahead and staying up on our email is pretty important. So ADM, aeronautical decision making. Sorry, I'm trying to cruise through this. I want to get all the way through tonight. What slide are we on? Ooh, a couple more. Here we go. So ADM is a systematic approach to the mental process used by aircraft pilot or aircraft dispatchers to consistently determine the best course of action in response to a given set of circumstances. So you can see the model there. This is kind of a flow chart of our decision-making process, how we react, and the cycle that we go through. So decision-making, dispatchers, responsibility, we got aircraft familiarity, staying physically fit. It's probably my biggest problem right now. I really, really, really like Mountain Dew. It's really, really, really bad. But I drink a lot of it. Ground and destination airport charts knowledge. Making sure.
Garrett,
Yeah.
you've got really long days and really long nights doing this. I don't think any of us would be hurt if we cut 10 minutes early.
Yeah.
I swear to God. I know I wouldn't be offended. Like, seriously. Does anyone want to stay and make Garrett go through ADM right now?
We can back it up.
I think the question I had to ask was you had asked what page we are on just after doing the situational awareness section, and so maybe you're tired.
I am totally fine picking up at ADM tomorrow after our quiz.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. There's only 10 more slides, but it'll take about 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes.
I'm also staying on too. So
What was that?
yeah, I'm also good staying on. So
Yeah. Either way.
I'd be just as happy taking that extra 15 minutes that we get back tonight to study for our quiz tomorrow, to be quite honest.
Okay.
If anybody else wants to chime in, I'm good either way. I'm just at this point thinking of our instructor's fatigue factor and stress levels.
Well, I'm fine. I'm fine ending it right now. That's good with me. Yeah, we'll pick it up tomorrow, 8 a.m. And then there's a couple more things that we got to finish off, just to finish off all the material that we need to cover. And then we'll, um, depending on where we get tomorrow, we'll start doing that practical dispatch application stuff. And we'll really start hitting, weight and balance charts. We'll do some more of those legal to go worksheets, things like that.
Has it been determined that we have a classroom space next week?
Oh, yeah. That's never been a question. It was the extra classroom space that we were concerned about. So, meeting once a week in a classroom setting. But as far as the 2 weeks, we've always had the 2 weeks reserved. So, but yeah, next week we start flight planning, and something that, well, we'll talk about that on Friday. We don't want to get you guys too, but yeah, let's wrap it up tonight.